everyone once again. Hope you're doing well and thank you for joining us today. And welcome to today's webinar. Can everyone hear me well? Let me know if you encounter any technical issues throughout my presentation. My name is Margarita and I am a part of the ENGin team responsible for curriculum development and volunteer training in our organization. Before we start our training, I would like to dwell upon some important points. Please put yourselves on mute unless you speak. This webinar will be recorded, so turn off your cameras if you don't want to go on a video that will be posted on our YouTube channel. We will have 10 minutes for a Q&A session at the end. You will also write your questions in the chat during the training. As today we have quite a lot of people, probably we won't have time to answer all of the questions. Or if you need any further clarifications, please feel free to email me at the address given on the slide for any further questions or clarifications. Please take 5 minutes to complete the feedback form about the training in the next couple of days. You will get the link on your email addresses. Your thoughts and advice will be so helpful for me to improve further trainings. Dear volunteers, you are doing the great job helping Ukrainian English learners boost their conversational and intercultural skills. And we do appreciate your desire to be even more helpful to your bodies. Hope this webinar will be useful to you and will bring more to encourage your learners' participation in sessions, welcome their spoken contributions, and motivate them. In this first part of the webinar, we will raise your awareness of factors which promote motivation and engagement during the sessions and ways to do that efficiently. So, what is motivation? Motivation is the thoughts and feelings people have which make them want to do something and take actions to achieve something. It affects the results and students' abilities. By building their motivation, you can help students become more skillful in English and nourish their ability to learn. Experts on motivation differentiate between two types of motivation: extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation comes from outside the learners themselves and may, for example, be provoked by the necessity or desire, for example, to pass an exam, or by the fact that the learner wants to get promoted or travel to another country. Intrinsic motivation is the act of doing something without any obvious external rewards. Learners do it because it's enjoyable and interesting, rather than because of an outside incentive or pressure to do that. For example, a deadline, and so on. An example of intrinsic motivation would be reading a book because you enjoy reading and have an interest in the story or subject, rather than reading because you have to write a report or to pass a class. No, try to encourage intrinsic over extrinsic motivation. Training the students to keep themselves motivated by developing an interest in the topic and a desire to deepen their knowledge is even more important in the long run for successful language acquisition. True language learning is a lifelong process, but to continuously achieve this, your learners need to find it enjoyable and rewarding to learn so they can develop a sustained level of motivation necessary for long-term achievement. And summarizing, the main factors influencing learners' motivation include usefulness of knowing the language, for instance, for promotion, for finding a job, for university entrance, etc. Interest in the target language culture. Thirdly, encouragement and support from others, from parents, friends, teacher, or a volunteer. Another factor influencing learners' motivation is feeling good about the learning process, feeling the progress, feeling self-confidence, independence, feeling responsible for your own learning and success. Finally, interest in the learning process, interest in session materials and activities, etc. Obviously, motivation is not the sole responsibility of the teacher or a volunteer, but indeed a lot depends on the mentor, and it is something that we can have a deep effect upon as volunteers. So here you can see my list of the most important qualities. Being passionate about volunteering and teaching, be patient, adapt to the level of students, be friendly and interesting, know learners' individual needs, be energetic, have original and unique style, help learners make progress, be flexible, show respect, give clear and positive feedback, inspire confidence, be approachable, and really listen to learners. And now let me tell you of the key tips for keeping your buddies engaged and motivated throughout the sessions. Tip number one, set a personal example with your own behavior. Be enthusiastic yourself about holding sessions. Show your interest in the topic. Be engaged yourself and smiling. It means be motivated as a mentor yourself. Tip number two, create a relaxed atmosphere in your session. Provide your learners with time to share happenings or events with you. Show empathy. If you have noticed that your learners seem to have had a hard day or are distracted by something, take a minute to ask them how they feel. Your students will appreciate it, even if you just listen and show concern. Be friendly and approachable. Use positive body language. Take the time on occasion to share something that is important to you. Share your problems, share your events, and so on. Tip number three, develop a good relationship with your learner. Establishing rapport at this point is crucial for successful sessions. Do it by finding likes and interests you have in common, share your preferences, learn about your body's life situation, and avoid traumatic topics for them. When you establish a relationship with your learner, they feel valued and cared about. As a result, they will feel more motivated to succeed and less afraid to fail. Tip number four, personalize the learning process. Make sessions more relevant to learners' lives. Personalized learning centers around the task of connecting a learner's previous experience, knowledge, and abilities with training materials that will link that understanding with new information. The simplest example of personalized learning would be when a volunteer provides learning material with proper content and context and in the best way for the learner. That could be a type of material used, text, interactive games, the time spent, the amount of material covered in each session, and the order in which the new information is explained. This will vary for each learner, as everyone has different learning styles. Let's take a look at how this would work in practice. Meet Jane, for example, your new speaking buddy. For example, you know the following information about Jane. She is studying for an IT degree, she prefers to consume video content rather than read, and she enjoys using technology and quite often uses mobile devices. So based on these parameters, a volunteer could adjust or create a specific learning path for Jeff. The path will be based on her education that is compatible with high level of educational content, experience, connecting information to what IT developer would be interested in, and preferred content type. So Jane could engage with content on mobile devices. Tip number 5, customize the sessions. Don't feel obliged to 100% and be faithful to the provided session materials. Adapt the sessions. One of the factors that may influence motivation is the intrinsic interest generated by the material used in the sessions. Feel free to adapt the length of materials, complexity, simplifying or explaining key language elements. Vary activities, tasks, and materials. That is tip number 6. Sessions, which always consist of the same routines, patterns, and formats, lead to a decrease in attention and an increase in boredom. Varying the activities, tasks, and materials and approaches of presenting them can help to avoid this and increase learners' interest levels. Despite the fact that ENGin sessions adhere to the above-mentioned points, you can do your best to make activities from the handbook more fun and interactive. And here are my suggestions on how to make these activities from our handbook more fun and interactive. Generally, you can do that by puzzles, presentations, pitches, quizzes, brainstorm sessions, games, and even virtual trips. Directly engage your students through problem-solving case studies, putting them in scenarios. One of the most useful resources is a word wall, the easy way to create your own teaching resources with quizzes, match-ups, random wheels, and many other things you can do there. Mentimeter is another website and a way to engage your buddies and help them to eliminate awkward silences. You may create easy-to-build presentations, interactive polls, quizzes, and word clouds, which imply more participation. Socratic, another resource that would create engaging learning materials such as games, quizzes, competitions, and exercises for students. FlexClip is a free tool that enables teachers to create custom DIY educational videos or presentations for lesson materials. Padlet. This is a platform in which you can create a single or multiple walls that are able to house all the posts you want to share, from videos and images to documents and audio, and it is literally a blank slate. Kahoot. This is a platform which could help to create a social, fun, and game-like environment in the classroom. Finally, EduCandy is an interesting tool for vocabulary teaching. With EduCandy, you can create interactive learning games in a minute, just by using a list of words that you would like students to learn. It comes with different game times, from anagrams to word search. Dear volunteers, if you have any other great resources you would like to share with us, different platforms that would really make our sessions more interactive, please mention their names in our chat. That would be appreciated. Here are my suggestions of several word games you can use during your sessions. Number 1, give students a topic, preferably the one you are covering. Ask them to write down as many words as they can think of for 1 minute. This can also be used like pre-assessment of what they know about the topic. This could include any verb forms, any nouns, and adjectives. Number 2, categories game. Students may be given more than one topic at the same time and write down as many words as they can for a minute. For instance, transportation, countries, and cars. Game number 3. Students need to find a word that starts with letters of the alphabet. Let's say the suitcase, and they write down the word starting with C, U, I, and etc. Game number 4. First letter, last letter game. Ask your learners to take turns to make a word using the last letter of the previous word. For example, flower, rain, neighbor, etc. Tip number 7, use positive feedback. This has been mentioned by you. Feedback is crucial to keep your students motivated, to keep students on track and motivate them to progress independently. There are some techniques to keep in mind when given feedback. Feedback should be given in a timely manner. When feedback is given immediately after showing proof of learning, the student responds positively and remembers the experience about what is being learned in a confident manner. Feedback can be given verbally or non-verbally, by gestures, face expression, and so on. Point out to students what they can do now that they were previously unable to attempt. Effective feedback needs to be specific, accurate, and clear, pinpointing the precise achievement or areas needing improvement. Point out areas where the student showed effort and where they did well. It will keep students motivated and show them the importance of perseverance. Here, you may see several examples on how to give positive feedback. You may use phrases like, "It really impressed me," "Great stuff," "Well done," "Awesome." "Keep up the good work. You will see the better results in the future." Or, "You have made some good progress. It would be good to see you focusing harder on this or that stuff." Tip number 8. Enhance the learner's self-confidence about language learning. Share your own experience of second language learning, if any. Explain that developing fluency may be a challenging task, and mastering a second language requires time and persistence, but practice makes perfect. Tip number 9. Empower your students. Give learners ownership and control over their learning. Together with a healthy self-confidence and the feeling they can succeed, can be a great way to promote motivation. Here is how you can foster this mindset in your students. It is great to give students a choice on the topics you will cover in your sessions. It was also beneficial to ask them find interesting resources and material to discuss. Ask your learners to perform post-reflection on every session. The post-session reflection is an opportunity for students to pause and assess what they think they have learned in the session or series of sessions. It allows them to identify aspects of the lesson that they struggled with or found unclear. It provides opportunity for students to request additional help, instruction, practice, or support before moving on to the next bit and batch of information. Tip number 10. Be a guide. Do not dominate in discussions, but be available to help guide collaboration and discussion as a facilitator. It is important that students don't come to rely on you as the single source of their learning, but rather someone who guides and informs their learning. Tip number 11. Don't underestimate flipped technique. That is what we frequently offer in our session materials. In flipped sessions, learners are introduced to the content outside the sessions, and while session time is reserved for more active learning like discussions and projects. The benefits include allowing students to work at their own pace, to determine for themselves the materials they need to review, and to ensure that they thoroughly understand the content. That is really useful technique. Tip number 12. Familiarize yourself with your learners' needs and goals and increase their awareness of objectives. Conduct needs analysis in your first session. A needs analysis is a questionnaire that enables ENGin volunteers to identify and prioritize their body's most important learning needs, find out who the learner is, and start figuring out how they feel about learning. A needs analysis also allows learners to discover and outline their own expectations and individual requirements. A template may be found in the handbook section on the ENGin website. Besides, help your learners to set clear objectives. They need to be attainable, measurable, relevant, and time-bound. Track your learners' progress using ENGin goal-setting template offered in a volunteer handbook. Tip number 13. Keep in touch. Ensure you can keep communication with your students always open, not only to provide feedback, but also maintain personal connection. Tip number 14. Do warmers, icebreakers, and lead-ins during your sessions. Give warmers to give your learner more energy at the beginning of the session, relax your learner, and encourage learners to communicate. Use icebreakers to get to know your learner, encourage a good rapport with them. Use lead-ins to prepare students to work on certain activities, to create interest, to personalize an activity, and to provide an opportunity for learners to bring their knowledge and experience to a topic. The examples of warmers and lead-ins, of warmers and icebreakers include Spotlight. This is one of the most popular activities. You need to ask your students to create 3 statements about them, 2 of which would be true and 1 false. Do the same, then share your statements and try to spot the wrong information. Another variation is Kim's game. You need to choose a selection of objects to use in the game. Of course, ideally it would be if your students are familiar with the names of these objects in English. It can be toys, household objects, shapes, or anything. You need to put the objects on the table in front of you in the full view of the camera. Give your students a moment to look at the selection and ask any questions. Then turn off your camera and remove any of the objects. Then turn on the camera again and ask your students to identify objects you have removed. Another activity, spot the difference. There is kind of similar to the Kim's game, but here you need to show your room, your setting in camera, then turn off your camera and ask your learners to identify what has been changed in the setting in the background. Finally, an activity offered as a warm-up is a word letter. This brain teaser is a stimulating way to start your session. Give your students 2 words, the starter word and the destination word. Both must have the same number of letters, 4, 5, or 6. Then your students have to change the word a letter at a time until they have reached a destination word. Every time they change a letter, it still has to be a valid English word. For example, leave, love, lose, lost, cost, cast, case, cake, etc. Examples of lead-ins may include showing a picture and asking to predict the topic, showing quote or question about the topic, musical guess the topic. Think of 3 or 4 songs which in some way reference to a topic. Play students a relevant segment of the song and ask them to write notes on what they hear in that part. Show your students a video, stop it and ask to guess what goes on next in the video. And of course, create mind maps. It's a great way to introduce new vocabulary or to boost their already known vocabulary. In this part of the webinar, we will have a look at some case studies. One of the most important popular questions we as ENGin team receive is how to engage a shy and reserved body who is reluctant to speak a lot. When it comes to dealing with shy students, you need to understand the root of this issue. Is it because they are just shy because of their personality, or because they are just shy to speak in front of you as experts in English? In that case, you need to explain that they need to practice, they need to be persistent, and it will come with practice. Start small. Ask a shy student a very open-ended questions, and you will get the response. Start your questions with when, where, why, and so on. Encourage longer responses from your students. Ask for clarifications. Let them move and speak at their own pace. Be patient. Do not put much pressure on such students. Use positive reinforcement every time they make progress. One excellent way to encourage free speaking is through using controversial questions and statements with such students. And one of the most useful techniques you could use with reserved bodies is suggest your learner changing roles. That is, hold one of your sessions being in the role of a volunteer. Suggest preparing activities and finding information. It would give your learner more confidence and autonomy and will make them more comfortable in further sessions. Another popular question is how to engage advanced learners. If you want your advanced students to sound more advanced, then you should begin by using more advanced English yourself and motivate them, improve their vocabulary that way. Easy ways of engaging advanced students would use real-life materials like podcasts, clips from TV shows, films, and so on. This allows students to experience a range of accents, different types of English spoken around the world, and so on. As learners now have a fairly good command of English, they love to debate, to talk about politics, history, arts, and entertainment. So, use these topics. They would be particularly interested in practicing their pronunciation and accent. Also, you could focus on idioms, slang, and puns with them. Introduce the idea of idioms, slang, puns, great way of helping advanced students to go beyond the literal meaning of the words. Finally, it encourages them to write a blog in English. That would definitely improve their writing skills as well. Another question is how to make discussions more controversial. You know that controversial topics allow students practice discussing issues that can elicit an emotional response. We all require an ability to speak about topics from a detached point of view. Initially, provide engaging background knowledge on the issue to boost their interest in the topic. Facilitate lively discussions by expressing your opposite point of view to make it debatable. Present a case study. That is a great way. It's one thing to have a theoretical discussion about a controversial topic, but when you add in the element of real life through the case study, it adds a whole new dimension to the discussion experience. Finally, do not be afraid to try different things with your students until you find something that works best for them. Thank you for your attention. I hope this presentation was useful for you and at least you could pick up some tips for you and you could pick some resources for you to use during the sessions. And now I will be really happy to answer any questions you have. Okay, we have Angela, please.
Yeah, the post-reflection on the session, do we ask the student to perform that at the end of the session or after the session on their own and then let us know at the next session? Or
Yeah, well, that could be done in different ways. Post-reflection may be performed after each session by the student, based on the material covered. That can be done again in two ways. You may talk to your body at the end of the session, asking him the questions like, what have you learned? What do you think you have improved during the session? For example, what are the 5 new words you have learned during the session? What do you think you need to work upon more? It can be done as kind of an interview. Another way of doing that is asking your students to perform post-reflections individually using that template. It will soon be available on the ENGin website. I am developing it, so you can use a template. It will contain just several questions, but ask your students to fulfill this form for them to track their programs themselves. That would motivate them, that would make them more independent. Another way is to ask your learners to perform self-reflection about the unit covered. So not after each separate session, but after the whole unit, the same way. So it's up to you. It depends on the pace you work like with your student and on the most preferable way for you to do that.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. So we have a question in the chat. If these websites you mentioned posted somewhere, after the training, I will send you this presentation on your email, so you can copy these websites, you can use them, not to lose that list. So yeah, it will be provided to you. We have one question in our chat. I have an advanced student and I want to make sure that they are interested in sessions. I'm currently using the session materials and my own session plans as well. Do you recommend to go to advanced session topics such as social issues, or could I do session topics which are also meant for beginner and intermediate students as well? Well, if you're working with advanced student, ENGin beginner session plans won't definitely go because they're too easy for advanced students. They provide some structured conversation topics, and the structure is with session slides, which won't be interested for advanced students. I would recommend to go to social issues, to go to controversial topics, some hot issues in the modern world, some real life cases that would be debatable. I also need to mention that ENGin is planning to work on more advanced session materials in the future. So I hope more materials will be available soon on our website. For now, just keep on using the existing intermediate advanced plans, and if you can, offer social topics, social issues, debatable cases, and so on. Hope I answered your question. Any other?
Yeah, I have a student who was actually designated as intermediate, but in fact she's advanced, and luckily her interests align with mine, so we can cover topics in depth. But one thing she does, perhaps that would help other advanced volunteers and buddies. She's been doing it for a while. She reads daily the New York Times and the Guardian. So there are times when we discuss the news of the day, the week, and then of course tackle issues in depth. So that may be helpful if you start with reading the newspapers.
Okay, that's great. That certainly makes a point, and it's really beneficial for students to read authentic materials. Thank you. Probably anyone would like to suggest their own tips for advanced students. Really, one of the great ways is this technique I mentioned with reluctant and shy students. But once you could try to change roles with your advanced learner and ask them to hold a session being in the role of a volunteer, that would empower them and inspire more confidence, and it will certainly motivate them even more for a while, because they will prepare their own materials, they will research, they will be deeply involved in the topic themselves. Okay, so we are running out of time now. If you have any further questions, tips, or piece of advice from me, from the ENGin team, please feel free to contact me on the email address mentioned in our chat. The slideshows will be shared with you on your emails. And the last question we have, I will answer it in the email address, not to keep our volunteers now because time's up. Okay, thank you very much for taking part in the webinar. Hope you could pick up any interesting things for you, and please find a few minutes to fill out the feedback form, which will be really appreciated and will help us to make further trainings more engaging, more interesting, and motivation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure to talk to you today, and hope to see you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.